Hello, and welcome to the Voices of the Australian Alumni, a brand new podcast series presented by the Australian Consulate General in Mumbai. I am your host, Tejas Nair, a proud Australian alumnus, culture entrepreneur, and a new media artist. With this series, we hope to shine a light on successful Australian alumni, learn about how they have adopted to the new normal, and discuss the future for the sectors in which they operate. Today, we're speaking about technology as a means to enable further access to education. And joining me is Abizer Merchant, a management professional with 15 plus years' experience in international marketing, business development, corporate relations, strategy, and policy development, with a particular expertise in the South Asia and Middle East regions. In June of 2014, he was appointed as the Director for India and Sri Lanka for Macquarie University, Sydney, and he is currently based out of Mumbai, India.
Hi Abizer, how's it going?
Good, Tejas. How are you?
Good, man. Just to start off for everybody tuning in, could you give us like a short introduction about you and your work?
Sure. So I grew up in Mumbai. I went to school in Mumbai. I went to college in Mumbai as well. Did my undergraduate degree over here itself. So very much a local Bombay boy in many ways. Did spend a lot of time in Australia where I did my master's degree. So that was around 2002 when I went to Australia to do my master's degree in marketing at Monash University at that time. So seems like a long time ago. It is a long time ago, but it's. It's been a great journey so far.
Cool, man. Amazing. And yeah, times have changed quite a bit since then. How did you get about to working with and within education? Was that something that you picked up while in India, or was it after you moved to Australia?
Yeah, look, it happened by, it wasn't planned. I didn't plan to actually come into the education industry and work in this industry. My aim was to find a job in my field, which was marketing. And it didn't matter whether it was education or something else. But it just happened to be that the first opportunity I got when I was in Australia after I graduated was with a university. And, it was in the international marketing department of the university as well. So, it happened by chance. I did apply to it. Obviously, me being a graduate of a state university and also being an international student myself played a big part in me getting the job as well, because I experienced what it had been to be a student coming from overseas, and then having seen the story on both sides. I think was a big, unique selling point for me. But then also having a good, strong marketing degree also really helped in having a good combination of skills, which helped me get that job.
Cool. And what was your time in Australia like when you were there doing your masters? Because I understand you've also done a huge part of your education here in Bombay, like you mentioned. So how was that different, and how was your time in Australia unique?
Yeah, so when I was in school and college over here, I didn't really enjoy that experience that much, to be honest, and I was a very shy kid, so I didn't really, I would say, fit in that much. But when I went to Australia, it was a very different environment. It was an environment where, it was much more encouraging. It was much more, you could pursue a whole variety of things without people judging you or saying things or whatever, and you could actually go about doing your thing the way you wanted to do it. So I think Australia for me was a big eye opener. It was also a big change for me in terms of my personality as well, because I got a lot more outgoing, a lot more confident, a lot more in terms of social, in terms of building networks, friendships, and the rest as well.
Absolutely, and like you very rightly mentioned, huge, and from my personal experience as well, a huge part of being an international student is also discovery and sort of walking into the unknown in many ways. And you've obviously worked with two universities yourself, La Trobe and Macquarie. Was that ever on the cards? Did you ever envision yourself working for a university in this sort of structure, or did that also just sort of happen incidentally?
No, look, it wasn't planned once again, as I mentioned, that I was looking for a good marketing job, after I finished my degree. And this is one of the jobs which was available at the time, which I applied for. And, my skill sets happened to just fit in with what the university was looking for. And also, these universities were also looking to build up their markets in India. So me being of Indian origin also helped because I have much deeper understanding of those markets as well.
Absolutely. And I would assume that it's a very fast growing, fast moving sort of space, because the world is obviously becoming much smaller as we move forward. How would you explain the current ecosystem of international marketing through the lens of education?
Yeah, look, to be honest, in it's something which I have thought of myself as well as how different it is, whether marketing education as compared to any other product or service. And to be honest, in many ways, it's not very different. So, we're using the same kinds of tools or the same kind of a range of data that we have to make a lot of our decisions. So, for example, segmentation, audience research, consumer behavior, pricing strategies, promotion strategies, the use of social media, the effectiveness of word of mouth in all service sectors is so important, and that's the same in education as well. I think the big difference would be is that we're actually dealing with real people, real dreams, and actually people who have actually invested probably the most expensive thing they'll buy after a house. So if you look at the cost of international education today or even 20 years ago, it was the most expensive thing you would have bought or your parents would have bought for you after buying a house. And many parents in India have saved for 20 years to actually afford an international education. So that makes you understand that besides your marketing strategies and the numbers which are there in front of you, these numbers actually represent a dream or represent a real person who's aspiring to change their life, change their life for themselves, not only for themselves but also for their families.
Absolutely. And I think, like you rightly said, there's so many nuances to those conversations in a place like India, where, the demography is so different from a city like Mumbai to a small town elsewhere. And education is very strongly tied in with the dream, of upliftment in society, financially, and in so many different ways. And even in terms of upskilling, people travel overseas to educate themselves in skills that they probably can't be educated in over here in many cases as well. And because there's so many elements tied into it, and it's also this very personal, emotional journey for so many people, the biggest question mark often turns out to be the value of, if it's going to cost us all this money to, say, send one of the children in the family or someone within the family to go and educate themselves, or the other case being someone would take a loan to be able to go out there and educate themselves in a manner. The biggest question mark is the value of that education. How would you, in simple terms, be able to tell somebody, the core value of not just studying but also living in a place like Australia? How important do you think that is?
Yeah. So, I think, so a very, very intelligent person once said that you can take everything away from a man, but you can't take away his education. So I think, that's the main thing about whether it's education at home or anywhere else, is that it stays with you for life. The skills will stay with you for life. Now, this question you've asked actually is very relevant to the current environment when we've moved to online teaching and we're not able to offer a face-to-face environment for many of our students. And one thing we've grappled with is that also the I would say the realization that the classroom in classroom experience is only one very small part of the international experience a student gets when they go overseas or when they go to Australia. And then you start from scratch by taking small steps, making your first friends, and then slowly building that up over a period of time to a full network of people that you know and who how you are engaging with all the time. So that's a very crucial skill, I think. Having to start from scratch when you're an adult, 21, 23 years old, having to start all over again is hard. And I think that also makes you a lot more confident, a lot more social. It hones up your ability to make friends, your ability to engage with people you don't know, haven't met before, and also appreciate the differences between people living in your country and then also in other places as well. So one thing for me was that I actually learned so much about my own country when I left India. People put a lot of emphasis on the university, on the degree, on the learning in terms of academic learning, but I think you're learning 10 times more outside the classroom than in the classroom.
There's also a sort of cultural preparedness that you sort of get exposed to when you're meeting all these people from all around the world. It acts as this cultural melting pot where you're getting to learn so much about the world that, often when you grow up in a city, you live in a city, you're sort of in a bubble of your own, and you're aware of everything that's around you, and you think the world, that's the entire world. But it's quite interesting, that experience as an international student. I want to ask you, how has this landscape changed since the early years? Because I know, me personally, extended parts of my family were, traveling to Australia to study in the early 2000s, which from their experience, I know was a very, very different journey to the one that I had, because I traveled there in 2010 or 11, 2011. And things had already changed quite a bit. And I see now, friends of mine traveling to Australia in 2019, 20, and again the landscape's changed. So from your lens, working on, both working and being a student yourself, how have you seen that landscape evolve and change?
So I think what has changed is, one is obviously the accessibility to a lot more people and a lot more students who could not afford education before. The other thing also which I would add in is that there's a greater focus on employability than there was ever before. Now, I'm not saying that 20 years ago, we didn't want to do a degree which was had high employability, but the focus has become a lot more sharper on the ability of your degree to get you a job at the end of it. So, if you think of the questions we've been asked in the last 20 years by prospective students, there's a growing focus on saying, what is the employability of my degree? What is the recognition of my degree? Is my degree portable internationally? Is it recognized internationally? Those questions coming up more and more and more. So there's obviously a much greater expectation from parents and students who are investing a large amount, and in many cases taking bank loans, on the aspect of employability. So I think that's one thing which has probably advanced in its importance as well. It was important before. I think it's become even more important now. And I think post the pandemic, it'll probably get even greater, sharper focus, because many parts of the world are going through kind of what you call as a recession in some situations as well. But it's not going to be near to anywhere normal in the next 2 to 3 years. So a lot of the students will be coming into the workforce after graduating, entering markets where there is not enough work or enough jobs in their area potentially. So that's one of the questions universities have to address and answer to prospective students: is what is the prospects of them finishing the degree and then getting a good job in their field as well. If you see now, safety, how welcoming country is, how welcoming its policies are politically, that's playing a very, very key role now in student choice and student destinations as well. So I think these are the few things I think which have changed dramatically in the last 20 years, which were, I would say important before, but have become a lot more in focus now in the last 20 years. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think some of the changes you mentioned are also quite positive in many ways. Even outside of education, they culturally bring countries and people together. Also addressing these conversations, we as people are obviously working closely together now. There's bilateral trade relations. There's a very strong sporting relationship between the two countries. There is a diasporic relationship within Australia. There's a huge Indian Australian community, and so on and so forth. How have you seen that relationship evolve through the lens of education again?
Yeah, look, I think many of these people, or most of these people, I would say, have Australian degrees, educated in Australia, speak fluent English, and in many cases, in blue collar, white collar jobs as well. So, what you have in Australia is, I would say, some of the best minds who are living there now, and they're playing a very, very influential role in further student choice. So, I mentioned about myself that when I went to Australia, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any family or friends over there. But it's very rare for us now to come across a student who says to us that I don't have a friend or family in Australia already. So it's become a very, very large driving force, for students, is the local community on campus as well. I think also as we, the next 10 to 15 years, we'll also see a lot of Indians in very senior corporate and academic positions across Australia. We're seeing that already in America, which is a much older Indian community compared to Australia and the UK as well. The UK, we have parliamentarians of Indian origin already. In Canada as well, we're seeing, a lot of people of Indian origin in parliament, in politics, in very senior positions as well. So, I think that's a matter of time that happens in Australia as well. As the Indian community settles down, becomes larger, more educated, more vibrant, and is able to influence a lot of the decisions that happen at the senior level by entering politics and other public roles as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more important part about obviously education in Australia is the tremendous business opportunity for Australia as a country itself. Obviously, as we know, the last 8 to 9 months have not been the most easy to work around when it comes to education overseas. A lot of it has now been happening remotely with video calls and so on and so forth. So, how is that? How would you say, in your experience, that's affected the international education ecosystem, and also the relationship between a student and the university or institution that they might have been studying at the time?
Yeah. So I think what we did, and many universities like Macquarie did in during the lockdown as well, was that to reduce the disruption to our students who are already on campus and those who are planning to come on campus in a few months' time, was to deliver a lot of our subjects and units online. So there is a lot of pent up demand in India for students to go and come to Australia to study, and whose plans have been delayed because of the pandemic. So one thing has been, a revelation for us is that the students and that generation of students who is looking to come, who are in the early 20s or then late teens, they are very, very familiar with the online format and very okay and open to engaging with us without actually creating a barrier around it as well. Now, that's exactly the opposite kind of situation we have when it comes to online study. Now, when it comes to online study, the students are saying, well, look, overwhelmingly, they're saying, look, this is a temporary solution. We cannot have this as a permanent solution. And, we need to come to Australia and experience the real thing, offering courses online is, I would say, a temporary solution for them and not a permanent kind of, solution for them at all. So, like Macquarie and everyone else are using some of the latest technologies to engage students, through the online medium, whether it's through teaching or whether just, through webinars or whatever. They're using the best technology as well. So, we also have to remember that in countries like India, while if you're in Bombay or Delhi or Bangalore, then you've got a pretty stable connection, and we can work and listen to tune in quite easily. But in many cities or many towns in India, especially rural and smaller towns, you don't have stable connections. You also don't have stable electricity as well in some cases as well. So for a student who's tuning into a synchronous class, a live class, it can be a pretty frustrating experience, to have to do that in the long term. So I think there are some infrastructural issues which we do face with students who are not in big cities. But overwhelmingly, we have been aware that students would prefer to be on campus and get the full experience of being in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, since we're talking about technology in education, it's also, I think it's an equally important tool, whether we're in a pandemic like situation trying to work remotely or on ground, on campus as well. The technology and infrastructure available to impart that education is tremendously important. Would you say that that is one of the sort of primary and key reasons that Australia becomes this exciting, proposition for someone looking for options when it comes to overseas study?
Yeah, look, I mean, Australia has always been, I would say, considered to be an advanced economy, even in the Indian market. I mean, Australia has always been seen as to be a developed country with, very the use of advanced technology as well. Many of our inventions are based around technology. And if you look at the black box in a plane as well, that's an Australian, kind of invention as well. The Wi-Fi, which my own university was involved with in the consortium of groups as well, was invented in Australia. So if you think of it that way, some of the big technological innovations that have happened in the world have come from Australia as well. So I think Australia can play a lead role in helping Indian institutions and Indian government as well in actually making it a lot more accessible to a large population in India to use education and technology related to that to reach out to a large number, millions of people across India as well. But once again, the investment is required in the infrastructure for the internet to be accessible across India as well, to make this a useful proposition. So I think, yeah, I mean, Australia can play a very major role in that area.
Absolutely. And like you rightly said, I think again, the infrastructure can't just be built from one end because of the way the internet works. It also needs to, the opportunity to share work from one place also needs to be able to receive from another for it to be a seamless experience. Keeping in mind the pandemic that we've had for the last, almost a year now, has the approach to how universities in Australia intend to deliver their programs going forward, has that also been changed, or is that still sort of in a work in progress space? Because I know students haven't started traveling back to Australia yet because of the travel restrictions. So I know things continue to be remote right now. But does this affect the strategy of universities going forward once travel restrictions do open up as well?
Yeah, look, we've learned so much in this last, 6 to 8 months about teaching online and delivering using technology to deliver, that we can now use all those learnings in the near future when we start seeing students returning to on-campus learning as well. So one thing we've I think realized, I would say, rather belatedly, is that you don't need to have a class, you don't need to have students in a classroom or in lecture theater for everything. There are a lot of things which are is essentially a monologue. Now, we also have to consider that while we may soon in the 6 to 8 months look in much be in a much better place with the pandemic, we also have to keep an eye out for what might happen in the future as well. So restricting large gatherings, which is one of the main causes for the spread of the virus as well, is something which will play on our mind continuously. So whether we need to have students in 3 to 400 capacity lecture theaters anymore is a question we'll all ask ourselves as well, and whether the content delivered in those lecture theaters can be delivered successfully in an online format is one thing which we will have to address, and we will start to address straight away as well, which will mean that even though you may be on campus, students need to be prepared to the idea that they will actually be home for some part of it, listening to a recording, something of that sort, and then only coming to the campus for things which they need to actually have physical interaction with the lecturer, with the other students, teamwork, assignments, all those kind of things, activities which they need to be, in the campus.
Absolutely. And I'm also interested in how some of these things you've mentioned could have impacted the decisions being made by say young Indian students that are looking forward to making the journey to Australia for their education. Has that decision also been impacted in some sense, or are they also now maybe considering that, hey, if this can be done remotely, then do I really need to travel to Australia? Because obviously there is a cost. There is a lot of cultural benefit and life experience to gain out of it, but there is a huge cost attached to that experience as well. And if the education can seamlessly be delivered remotely, then is that a question that's also sort of coming into trend?
So I think there are different markets for purely 100% online, and there's a different market for students who like to have an on-campus, face-to-face, in-country experience. I think those are two very different markets. So to give you an example, we deliver our global MBA through Coursera, the Coursera platform, which is a full MBA which you can do online without actually having to come to class or any kind of physical interaction at all. So it's a completely 100% online delivered MBA, a really high quality MBA focused on upskilling people in the workplace. The students who are looking to come to Australia and study in Australia and get the full experience have very openly, been it's a very open kind of thing where they've said to us that this is a temporary measure. We want to be on campus, we want to be in country. All countries, including Australia, will have to look at a strategy where they start to bring in, or at least open some channels to bring students back to Australia in a limited format till things are, till maybe enough people are vaccinated or it's safe enough to travel across the world. Yeah.
Correct. And is this like you said also important conversation between the two countries at a government level as well to try and come closer to address this problem. Because, like you said, there are a lot of students that are enrolled in Australia right now, but they're waiting here for more clarity on when they'll be able to travel and so on and so forth. Similarly, there are still students who are in Australia wondering, should I go back home, or is it better or safer for me to be in Australia in university? Is that a conversation that's also moving forward in terms of policy exchange, or do you have any recommendations on what those conversations could be?
So, I mean, the Indian government is very aware, through their embassies and high commissions in Australia as well, about the large number of Indian students who are currently in Australia, and also many of them who are stranded in India, wanting to come back or wanting to start their degrees in Australia as well. And one thing which we've done, and almost universities have done, is to keep our local Indian mission aware of how we're looking after students. And I can say overwhelmingly, not just my university, but also universities across Australia have done a great job actually, looking after the needs of students, while they are in Australia, in terms of many of them who had lost their jobs, and working part time and not able to then support themselves because of that. There have been a number of schemes universities have offered, and just to give an example, things like delay in paying their fees, or giving them $2,000 grants to keep up with their bills or pay their rent, their food bills and the rest as well. The thing is that international students in Australia are Australia's guests. They are our guests in our country. So it is our duty to look after them and take care of them as well while they are there in country. So I think while it generally involves a bilateral conversation when there's a problem, right? And I think so far, I feel at least that Australia's done a good job, and its university has done a good job in looking after those students, so things don't escalate to a diplomatic level where and the Indian government has to raise issues about how well the students are being looked after while in Australia as well. Now, having said that, there is, during the pandemic, I think it was July, maybe August, maybe, but both the prime ministers had a call set up in which they raised the level of engagement between the two governments to the ministerial level. So that's been a big lift to the India-Australia relationship as well. A large part of it revolves around defense, and defense strategy and defense engagement as well. But there is also education included in that as part of the whole process as well, including things like the recognition of each other's degrees and qualifications, and the rest as well comes into play as well. So I think the raising of the relationship to that level is a big step forward for the India-Australia relationship. I think a few days ago, in fact, was it last week itself, that India announced, or India kind of presented its own strategy towards Australia, its own economic strategy towards Australia, after Australia had done so a few years ago when they announced their India economic strategy. So you've now seen India respond to that with their own strategy towards Australia as well. So I think both the countries are moving closer. Tourist activity out of India is driven by students. So it's their mums, their dads, their friends, their family who are coming to visit them is driving the market for tourism from India to Australia as well. So this is the profound effect education has to the other business sectors as well.
Fantastic. So the next point, leading on from what you said, this is something I personally am also quite curious about, which is the exploding business of edutech, which I think globally is also moving so fast because the world is becoming a smaller place, clearly. And both India and Australia have these unique sort of environments relating to education. Whether it's the conversation around infrastructure or capital or opportunity, the specialization within education that one can get. Do you think do you envision any potential collaborations between the two countries, whether at a privatized sector, level, or public, to come together to work within the edutech spectrum, and or is there already certain collaborations of this kind?
Yeah, look, I think there is already collaborations happening in that area. We do know of Australian universities who are offering jointly with an Indian partner on an Indian platform their degrees as well. So that already has started in a small level already, and I think we'll see more and more coming in as well. So my own university, I mean, even though it's on a partnership with an Indian institution, we deliver on Coursera the full global MBA, but we also deliver a whole range of smaller upskilling courses as well, which are meant for people who would like to, let's say, improve their English language abilities or improve the way they use Excel in the business environment. I think there is a much greater potential for Australian universities providers, education providers to to partner with Indian organizations and institutions as well as platforms, education platforms as well. Simply because the market for education in India, if you leave aside the ones who want to go abroad, the market which cannot afford to go abroad and is at home is massive. There's a much larger market which cannot afford and will stay at home and probably wants different ways of being taught as well. Now the challenge over here is that even though there's very large volume, you have to be aware of, or Australian providers have to be aware of a couple of things. One is that you have to price it based on the needs and the paying ability of the local market in India. If you're going to charge Australian prices online to an Indian market in India, it's not going to work. So we have to tailor our product, tailor our pricing to the needs of the Indian market. Secondly, I would say is also the need for tailoring the content, right? So we can't just take something which is meant for an international audience and a vanilla kind of program and saying this is meant for anyone anywhere in the world and you can do this. It may not work in India. So in India we have very different kind of skill sets, upskilling, reskilling needs, which are required for our economy. And if those courses don't address those skills, then you've got a shrinking market there as well. So once again, the product has to be tailored to the needs of a very large market and what their upskilling requirements are. Australia has the quality framework. It also has the very strong curriculum development ability to deliver those kind of courses in partnership with Indian institutions. So to give an example, Macquarie is in partnership with IBM and with the CBSE school board in India, where we're developing a unit or a course, a subject in AI, artificial intelligence for year 11 and 12 kids, right? So Macquarie's role in this essentially is to build the curriculum, right, and structure the curriculum for them. Also build in the quality framework to ensure that the learnings are at a level which is meant for year 11 or year 12 students, which can be assessed later on, but also then providing material to train the teachers to deliver that program as well, because a lot of the CBSE teachers may not be familiar with delivering a course in AI if they're not in the technology area. So we're doing all of that in partnership with IBM and with the CBSE board as well. So, I think these are kind of examples of what needs to be done as well. But I think the challenge for Australia really is whether they can adjust, tailor their product, including pricing, and dare I say also looking at Indian platforms to deliver the product rather than an international platform like Coursera or something of that sort, but looking at Indian platforms, local platforms to deliver it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some really interesting points that you mentioned, and I want to talk, from a holistic perspective. All of it also ties into the fact that it's very challenging and important equally to be able to build that relationship with the potential students that might engage with an Australian university. And obviously, in India, education ties in very closely, like we mentioned earlier, to social status, to reputation, to upliftment, and so on. So the brand of that institution is also extremely important, I would think. Has it been challenging, would you say, to be able to build those recognizable brands from Australia in India, or is it now slowly changing, and are these names getting more and more recognized?
Yeah, so to be honest, we don't have an Oxford or a Cambridge kind of brand, like the UK has, or a Harvard like the US has, or the UCLA kind of brand. There's no single university in Australia which attracts that kind of attention. Right now, it's 20 years ago, when I chose Monash University, was because not because I had heard of the brand or something of that sort through marketing or something of that sort. I was reading a book, and the person who wrote the book, the author, in his bio wrote that he had studied at Monash University. So that was the only university I heard of. So I thought, okay, I'll apply to Monash University. It must be a good university, So, there was a problem around, obviously, that most universities in Australia, didn't have a brand as such, a global brand, in India to really show off as well. So one of the things which I know the Australian government is addressing in partnership with universities as well is a holistic approach to bring a brand or education brand out in the market as well. So rather than each state or each university or each provider going out to the market saying offering different things or kind of promoting their unique selling point, we go with a brand Australia kind of approach where in this umbrella everyone is included. So not only higher education universities, TAFE, colleges, private colleges, everyone, including schools, if I might say, as well, included in their brand to display and to promote Australia as a destination of high quality education. So, that's basically, I think, the approach which Australia should adopt. Whether, and so far it's been a very fragmented approach, we have to show students the quality of our teaching, the quality of our research, the quality of the experience, the overall experience of being in Australia and being in a safe, destination where their parents will be comfortable sending them as well, and an environment which is welcoming. So I think these are some of the core messages we need to get out there. The quality message is most important as well. Australia has the advantage of having just 40, 42 universities, many of them which are publicly funded universities. So you're not dealing with hundreds and hundreds of universities with different levels of quality. You're dealing with a small number of universities which are funded by the government. So that makes it a lot easier for students to assess quality of different institutions as well. But it's hard in India also because we like, for example, Macquarie University essentially uses a public relations agency. We don't do any kind of direct advertising. We don't put any ads in the paper or anything of that sort. What we do is PR. So we're writing authored articles on different areas of research. It could be the environment. It could be consumer behavior, anything of interest to the Indian audiences through different newspapers like the Economic Times, Hindustan Times, Indian Express, any of those papers online or in physical form, will reference a Macquarie academic who's written that article as well. So we use a lot of below the line kind of techniques rather than in your face as well. And I think that has a more lasting effect on the audience as well.
Absolutely. I feel it's also more approachable that way when the conversation is around education and not an off the shelf sort of product. Well, wow, there's so many incredible points over there, and I wish we could continue talking about all of them. But I want to ask you one last question before we wrap this up. Is obviously you work in the space of education, so you see a lot of young. I'm sure you know many stories of young adults from India planning to go to Australia to study. What is the advice you would give to someone looking to travel to Australia to pursue their education? And more specifically within the sector that you now work in? For you it was an accident, but today there might be many people looking to enter the education space as a opportunity to work as opposed to just study. What kind of advice would you share with them?
Yeah, so I think maybe the first step would be is when you're looking to study in Australia or anywhere in the world. I think a lot of students actually thrive in smaller cities and smaller campuses, mainly because of their personality traits as well and how they would like to be living or studying as well. So that's another point, is that you want to take in consideration your own personality characteristics and what works for you and what doesn't work for you when you choose a university. You should tap into the alumni network of any university that you're looking to study in and get their advice or get their feedback as well. It's always good to talk to alumni to see what they liked and what they didn't like. And you'll find that most alumni will be very happy to talk to you, and very happy to talk about the alma mater as well. In most cases as well, I would also say that encourage them to also talk to students who are currently studying there as well. So get the current experience of students who are there as well, and then form an opinion about which university they'd want to select and go around as well. There's a big craze around looking at international rankings, which to me, it has limited use, to be honest, because many of the rankings are based around research, ratings rather than the actual course the student is wanting to do, and it provides a ranking for the overall university rather than the actual area the student wants to study in. So, while many universities may claim a top 100, top 200 ranking in the world, what matters to the student is in their area of study, whether it's finance or it's marketing or anything else, where does that university stand in that field? And that's something which they need to dig harder and find more about that university as well. They'll also find is many academics who teach degrees will be also happy to talk to them as prospective students and give them feedback as well as to what their expectations are and whether they'll be met in that program as well. So I think making a decision around a university has to be about a lot of engagement with a whole variety of audiences, rather than saying, look, my uncle or aunt who lives down the road said I should go to Macquarie University. I mean, you obviously want to trust them for sure, but and they should be part of that whole cycle, but they should not be the only part of that, that process. Now, coming to the other part of the question about, the international education in terms of international offices of universities itself. To be honest, the international offices, which are mainly professional staff who work there, we're not academics or, we don't have PhDs or anything of that sort. We're essentially professional staff who are in the area of communications, marketing, sales, and those areas particularly. And we function, I wouldn't say like a private company, but I would say we have very different kind of functioning as compared to an academic area of the university itself. So it is kind of tends to be a more corporate environment. So there's a whole range of professionalism protocol which we need to follow, and company policy and the rest that needs to be followed, including things like branding, communication, what we say, speaking with one voice. All of that is important, for us as well. It's The international offices of universities are perhaps the most multicultural work environments you'll find anywhere in the world. I mean, in both universities I've worked for, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, it's just if you have 100, 200 staff, and you'll find at least 50 to 70 countries in those 100, 200 staff over there. The number of languages will go into the hundreds if you start to count them. So what that brings to you is basically you're meeting people from around the world. You're not meeting them, you're working with them. You're seeing the way they think, how they think differently, and how they solve problems also differently. So the learnings are incredible, particularly in international office, because there are so many cultural aspects coming into play on a daily basis. I myself managed a large group of people when I was a Latrobe as well. And, none of them were from the same nationality. So if there were 7 people reporting to me, all 7 came from different countries, spoke different languages, and they all were very different in what they expected from me as a manager and how they engage with me as well. So no two individuals were the same. So I think if you're looking to get into the international education sector, it is definitely one of the most rewarding sectors to get into. It is as like all sectors, it is hard to find work in this area, particularly because it is an area which is in high demand. It does pay very well. Universities do provide double the amount of superannuation a normal employer would pay. So normally it's 9%. Universities provide 18% superannuation. So that's a very attractive part for many people who work in universities in Australia. So I think, if you're looking to get into this sector, it's really about your skill sets, your ability to work in a team, and your ability to communicate clearly ideas that you may have as well. So, if you're looking to get into the international office of your own university you're starting at, it's a good idea to network with people in that university, in that office, and get to know them as well. So when the interview comes, they're familiar with your name, they're familiar with who you are as well. So I think that's probably one tip I would give as well. But I think, it's done great wonders for me, so I'm sure it'll do wonders for everyone else as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some fantastic information in there, both professional advice as well as adapting to a cultural plus professional environment. And on that wonderful note, thank you so much, Abizer. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, knowing more about your work, and learning about the challenges, the pros, the cons, the evolving landscape of education going hand in hand with technology. So thank you so much for joining me on this chat and on the series, and it's been an absolute pleasure once again. And I hope we get to chat more soon.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure as well.
Thank you so much.